Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to Living the Line.
and we've got a very special episode today. The kids
Yeah,
are gonna go to Hollywood. No,
you went and had a fun time while I sat here sick with COVID, and so Sean's gonna give us an update on what Sean did while I sat in my house.
yeah. So I went to SPX this weekend. So not only had I not been to SPX before, I have never actually tabled at a convention before. So the time that I was like really heavy into cartooning and things like that, I just powered through and did pages. And I think basically the only two conventions before this I've ever been to is I went to Emerald City Comic Con in I think 2008. And pretty much the only thing I did there is like look at the list of cartoonists and be like, oh, Brian O'Malley's there. Oh, Hope Larson's there. Oh, Colleen Coover's there, and then just hit all their tables and then like ran away.
Yeah. Well,
And,
after Comic Con, that seems like the way to do a con, at least as Comic Con
right.
suggests cons.
Yeah, as opposed to actually having your own table, which having never done that before, I didn't realize how good it would feel, right? Like I was sitting behind or standing, I actually stood the entire time. I was standing behind our half table, which is what I was able to get at the last minute. And I had these two books with me that I'm super proud of, and I think they're fantastic. And so it was a very easy experience to just talk to people about these awesome books. And it was really, really refreshing. I don't know if I've ever had a social experience where there was so much positivity in a sort of genuine kind of way. Even people who wanted to argue about something, it was very pleasant. Like I had a good time. Like it was like good faith. Like somebody has a different opinion than me. Kind of argumentation. I just don't know if it's because it's all comics people, and it's actually takes place in a hotel, and so lots of the people who stay or are going to be tabling at the place stay at the same hotel. And so like when I was checking
Uh,
in on Friday night, I was like kind of parsing it out. I'm like, walking by that, that's a comics person. There's another
yeah.
one.
That's cool because then it doesn't really matter when the convention closes. It's just the whole weekend.
Yeah, and that includes, I mean, I met some amazing people at breakfast, on Sunday. Uh, like the morning of the convention, I met Kristen Scholl. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Who's a really cool cartoonist, and her roommate as well. And just lots of really interesting people like all over. And since I didn't have a car, I didn't plan on doing anything. I got all my books shipped in from the Diamond warehouse. Oddly enough, I was apparently the only person shipping from Diamond, which was interesting. Uh,
Well,
uh,
a lot of people are just self-publishing, right? Zines and
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. So I was very interested to sort of I was trying to remind myself this is a learning experience for me, and there was definitely a ton of learning in terms of especially setting up the display, what types of items that I had. At the last minute, I was making a push to have a mini comic available for people who. There were definitely people who were really into the books, but like either didn't want to pay that much for a book, because both books are fairly pricey.
yeah. Well,
Plaza,
and there's some how many exhibitors were there?
I mean, hundreds. It was
So four
massive.
four or 500, and they're trying to save their money to get something from as many as they can. So that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly right. And so there were definitely a lot of people that I was like, this person wants to buy something, but is not seeing anything that is the right size or price range for them. Like this
Yeah.
person wants it. Um, and I think having next XPX and next show having some kind of smaller offerings, even things that are not necessarily offered through Diamond, would be a good idea. So I did a 24-hour comic back in 2010, I think, about being
Hmm.
on the Nickelodeon television show Guts. And so
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to print up some of those next year, or before the next con I go to, and bring my like old Guts T-shirt and medal and like display them, together. Uh,
That's like a perfect SPX comic too, because it's autobiographical, but it's like the right kind of autobiography where it's a strange thing that only you can really report on,
right.
and yeah, that would be a perfect from the
Yeah.
the sense I got of the show, just jealously following along on Instagram. That seems like a good idea.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I just uniformly positive and amazing stuff. I mean, it was quite intimidating how much amazing things there are out there. I mean, I just don't think it's possible for anybody to follow everything that is happening in
Yeah.
comics. And I had this discussion. You know, I talked to so many people who I had met before, and that includes a lot of journalists who I had, you know, emailed in the past with. Like I used to write for the Comics Journal, and you know, I've written news pieces and things like that. And so, in the course of that, you sort of feel out other people sometimes, like, "Hey, are you looking at this story? Have you heard about this? Have you heard about that?" So I've exchanged a lot of, you know, emails over the years with some of the people that I met, and it, depending on their viewpoint, depending on the things that they are personally attuned to, it seems like you have a completely different view of what's happening in comics, because comics doesn't
Yeah.
mean comic stores anymore. Comics means the direct market, comics means the bookstore market, comics means the manga market, comics means small press, comics means web press.
Yeah.
Comics means platforms like webtoons that are read by apparently hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And when they get big stuff, it's put out in a published form through them. I mean, that's just something I was just not attuned to at all uh,
Yeah.
until I was actually in person at Comic Con, and now it's, you know,
Yeah.
SPX, and on the ground. It's like, oh right, these are all of these different facets, and great material is being made in that. So you want to see some books?
Yeah, I do. Because, like I said, I was jealously following along and I saw a bunch of people that we've made friends with through the channel. And then a bunch of other people I want to talk to or that I've been trying to talk to. You know, so I'm excited to see what gems you've dug up there.
Yeah, so first off, I should just say the caveat. This is not, not only is this not comprehensive, I mean, I basically just did nothing but stand at the table. I felt,
Yeah.
I felt a, like kind of moral obligation to, uh, to you and Dave and Yokoyama and Ryan Holmberg, the people who are going to be, you know, getting royalties from the books I was selling, like, and a little bit of an obligation to me. Like I flew there to do
Yeah.
it, you know, can I pay for my flight and everything, you know,
Yeah.
which
Fair.
is maybe a little silly. I took it a little to the extreme, I think, but the only real wandering around I did was before the convention on Sunday, and just a teeny bit before Saturday. So you know, a couple times, like I saw pictures after the con of people were like had like the new Santos sisters, and I was like, oh, where did you get that? And they're like, well, Floating World had a booth like 10 feet from you. I'm like,
Did
ah,
you grab one of those? That's a funny book.
I didn't. No, I have the first issue and I love it.
Oh, okay. We should talk about that. Partners and Sons sent me that one and it surprised
uh,
me.
yeah, Floating World is putting it out, and you know, if I had thought like, oh, Floating World is 10 feet away from me, I probably would have gone and talked and introduced myself to Jason, who, you know, I've interacted with a couple times, and you know, people
They're
who are
doing a
doing
bunch of
amazing
good
stuff.
books.
But that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying is like it's right there. I didn't
Yeah.
know that Fantagraphics was there until Gary came by the booth, and I got to chat with him for a while. You know,
Oh, he
so
came by and talked to you?
yeah, we had a good time.
Did he
Uh,
remember who you were? We
no,
introduced ourselves at Comic-Con and he
no,
was like,
I think yeah, no, I just think he meets so many people.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just, you know, it's just in and out. But yeah, we talked a little bit about some upcoming books they have, and yeah, I was realizing that I've probably read, you know, I was talking a lot about influence this weekend because I talked with some people about, you know, the first time I read different comics and stuff. I
Yeah.
read Cerebus and the Comics Journal both at the age of 12.
Early.
And
Wow.
yeah, and I think both of those things are, you know, very, very influential in terms of framing of what can be comics and what can be art and what does art mean. And you know, I had never gotten the opportunity to tell Gary that, and you know, it was the end of the afternoon on Sunday, and he's blowing off a little steam. It was nice to just be able to just tell him that, and you know, have a little chat uh, before he headed off. But yeah, I got to laden his suitcase a little bit more. That's the
Good,
one show.
good, good.
That's the one thing about giving people books at the convention is you know, some people are eyeing like a two pound, 3 pound, 4 pound book and being like, this might put me over my weight limit.
Yeah, that's true too. But I mean, I don't know. You're going to a place to grab a bunch of books, like you're packing some extra air when you're going out there for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't need these clothes, do I?
did they have
Uh,
a FedEx thing set up like at Comic-Con? Comic-Con had this huge like FedEx packing for shipping stuff.
No, that would have been really convenient. So the way SPX is set up, they will take in shipments several days in advance, but their shipping out from the convention, it all has to be packed up and printed out. And so
Mm,
I probably would have had to have done all that stuff. I had a very early flight for financial reasons because I got the ticket at the last minute, and the difference between leaving um, at 6:30, which is what I did, and leaving at like 9:30 was like a $400 difference or something. It's like
yeah,
I'm not gonna stay one hour extra hour at the con, so that and that's
yeah,
gonna cost me $400.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it was a real adventure and just an amazing experience, and I'd heartily recommend it. And I'm hoping next year I'll be there with a full table, and I'll have seven or eight books and lots of comics, and hopefully Graham will be up for coming again, and me and Graham will be there, and maybe you and Matt come do some signings.
Hopefully I can be there so I can man the table for a little bit while you get to wander and vice versa.
Yeah,
Yeah, it looked amazing. I really wish I could be there. It'll just depend on I where Tori's at, basically,
yeah,
if she's for people who don't know, we both got COVID and Tori seems to have long COVID, so she's having a hard time even like walking around the backyard still.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, depending on where she's at, hopefully a year from now it will be
yeah.
good. But yeah, that's putting some constraints on what I'll be able to do over the next however long.
Right.
But
Well,
anyways, let's look at some
yeah.
books.
All right. So here is a sampler of Kristen Schull. I apologize again if I'm not saying that correctly, Kristen. Kristen Schull has a diary comic that she has run for 3 years in a row, one
Wow.
page a year. So it's sort of like the American Elf model, but very interesting. Um, very interesting stuff, uh, including because she gets more formally, I think, more formally sophisticated as she's going and tries out a lot of different things. Um, it reminded me just a little bit of like Ariel Schrag, if you've ever read any of her
Mm-mm.
stuff. Ariel Schrag did a autobio comic when she was a teenager, um, which was an interesting you know an interesting thing. I actually it's a really good read, and the stuff I've read so far of this really beats out most of the autobio stuff. It is very slice of life, but she gets a lot of interesting insights into art making and sort of why she's committed herself to this project, which I think a lot of cartoonists will be able to identify with. And the sort of feeling of like you're stuck in in your formal constraint. Also, really interesting to note. She and I talked over breakfast, and she has a fantasy comic that she is essentially editing. She didn't call herself an editor, but when she actually described the project to me, it's a very interesting project where it's essentially like an open world fantasy concept,
Hmm.
where the only rule, she has a big map and marked out where each cartoonist story gets to take place, and then they do everything else. And the only rule of it is that everybody has to abide by everything that previously happened. And
Wow.
so it's a very exciting kind of project. Oh, and also no like time messing, no messing with time, no apocalypse, nothing like that.
No,
So
no multiverse bullshit.
exactly. So like
Good.
basically she's essentially saying like don't upturn the apple cart and you get to be in this anthology. And they've done 3 issues of it so far. And I didn't get to see this in person, but it sounds very interesting. And the other thing that was fascinating to me is that she has been selling them at Ren fairs. And she goes
Ah.
to a Ren fair and sets up a booth there. And she said, "Yeah, I just put up the big map, and everybody sees the big map and is really excited, and they come in and talk to me. I'm the only person selling comics." And I thought that was a very interesting. Uh, I would call it a marketing strategy, but I don't think that really does it justice because what she's doing is identifying a location that has no comics. She's
Well,
like,
and an audience that her content speaks to, but maybe wouldn't necessarily pick up comics. So she's
right.
that, yeah, it's like it's not just marketing, it's opening up a new market almost.
Mm-hmm. and
That's
and
genius.
yeah. So anyway, it was a fascinating conversation, and she's a fascinating person. So I hope that you'll follow her on Instagram. She is ego_gala on Instagram, and Ego Gala is the name of her diary strip, and she has these samplers, which are essentially best of years. And
Okay.
I would definitely recommend picking up a sampler. And I'll send this one to you, Carson, so you can read it too. And you
Well,
know,
I need to get that anthology because that sounds
yeah,
really interesting to me. We all know that I'm cranky about diary comics, so they have to be
yeah.
really good. I just got some diary comics. Well, not diary comics, but kind of like a American Splendor-ish type
Hmm.
of things that I haven't read them yet, but they look good. I'm pretty hopeful. So every now and then, but
I would say this one is self-aware of the fall downfalls and limitations. There's a section in here where she's talking about reading another fashion designers talking about the purpose of their particular designs, and she says, "I wonder
mm.
what my audience is," and she says, "Oversharing young adults."
Yeah, see, that's almost where it irritates me the most is when it gets so self-reflective and it's like, okay, if you know that it's a goofy thing to do, why do you keep doing it? I don't know. I'd have to see it.
Yeah.
Some of them are done really well.
Yeah, and this is a very interesting one, and interesting life it gets insight into. Okay, so so those of you guys who don't know, Ginseng
Oh.
Roots is the new Craig Thompson piece. Craig Thompson was not there, as far as I know, but I had planned on, like, finally I'm going to get caught up on Ginseng Roots, and I'm going to pick up all these um, from Tom K, who is the publisher at Uncivilized and is a fantastic cartoonist in his own right. Unfortunately, Ginseng Roots, that box did not get shipped to Tom. But
Mm.
fortunately for me, Tom lives in the same town, and we're going to hang out soon. So hopefully, I can buy it from him in person.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
But Tom,
Grab me copies too. I'll pay you.
totally, Tom Kaczynski is the publisher, and Ginseng Roots is a two-color book, and this is a basically a little teaser that was done for the 20th anniversary of Goodbye Chunky Rice, which is I don't know, we might talk about it at some point because I love Craig Thompson, but Goodbye
Yeah.
Chunky Rice is probably the most depressing book I've ever read. I actually had to just get rid of it. I couldn't have it near me.
Oh
Uh,
shit.
it's something about the combination of, this is a character from Goodbye Chunky Rice.
Yeah.
Um, Something about the combination of the cartooning and the design and the themes was just, at a certain point in my life, it was too much for me to handle. I really just couldn't. It hit too close to too many things.
Would you
Um,
revisit it now?
I would be willing to, yeah.
Is it toe in the water?
Yeah, exactly. But this is essentially like introducing ginseng roots through self-reflection on Chunky Rice, and it's a little mini and very cool item. And I'm really still looking forward to picking up ginseng roots, and hope we get to talk about that. Um, okay, so this is I talked to the gentleman who was behind this. This is a postcard. This was a project that is amazing, and apparently it failed on Kickstarter, which I was just shocked to hear. Finding Jack Kirby in a pile of zinc. And what this is someone found a bunch of teenage Jack Kirby comics. They found the
Mm.
zinc plates for them. And
Wow.
this included a pile. This is basically a pile of zinc, like they're describing it. Here was hundreds of zinc plates, and it was a teenage Will Eisner drew one strip, and a teenage Jack Kirby drew another strip, and it's a really quite interesting project. So they didn't raise the money for it, but I'm going to talk to these gentlemen and see if there's something else that we can do about it. And
Yeah, I
here,
can't believe that. I mean, I guess because the art's like not that great, it may, it's their teenage work. I'm assuming it's not as refined. I could
well,
see why people
it's
would be skeptical, but from a historical standpoint, like that should be a given.
yeah, that's right.
Like
That's exactly
somebody
my
should be
thought.
doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in a Bigfoot style. So essentially, you know, uh,
Crazy.
Kirby drawing like a Bigfoot comic artist, and then the Eisner stuff apparently changes halfway through. It morphs from like a Bigfoot style into a Raymond knockoff about
Ah,
halfway through it.
Man, if
So
you could get a hold of those Stan Drake Bigfoot things and like wrap those three in a package of like, here's some failed Bigfoot. Oh, fuck.
so interesting. Uh,
Yeah, that's amazing.
okay, so this is not a book strictly, but I thought it was interesting anyway. This is a sample by a printer from China who came and talked to me. She was very nice. Her stuff looked very nice. I don't think I will ever print in China. I might be wrong about that. Maybe things will change. But it was an interesting moment for me to kind of reflect on how happy I am to have a relationship with the printer that I like in Canada.
Yeah.
And when I talk to the people in Canada, I have a really clear idea of what they do. I have a really clear idea of who's doing it and what they're getting paid and what the working conditions are and all those things. And it was interesting because I can understand why people print in China, but there's something about it that doesn't like sit right for me.
Well, and it's risky too. I mean, Fantagraphics has had a couple books now get caught up in shipping, like just they get stuck in the port for months and stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas Canada, they're just like a truck rolling over the border.
Yeah. Yeah. The particular place that I print with, especially, they literally can, rent a truck and drive it across uh, every day or
Yeah.
every Monday or whatever. Anyway,
But they
you
get
know,
that sexy bamboo paper though.
that's true. Well, we could get we've got our stuff, which is very good. But yeah, it would be nice if the U.S. would start printing bamboo or growing bamboo specifically for paper. Uh,
Yeah.
you would think that that would be. I mean, it grows just fine in North America.
Oh,
Uh,
my parents' backyard, they got like one and it went and they couldn't get rid of it. Yeah.
so anyway, okay. So this one, Mozzarella Rumble in the Jungle, is by Graham Millar. Uh,
Oh yeah.
our social media guy. So if you ever see posts from us on Instagram or Twitter, or Facebook, you can have fun trying to guess whether it was me or Graham who put it together. But this is a very fun thing. Graham did this mini all on one sheet of paper, and
Oh
so
wow.
the original is all constructed on one sheet of paper, and yet it's laid out like a mini.
That's
And
cool.
he's got a fun, crude, energetic style that I really like. Crude in a good way. I don't mean that in a bad way. But you can see like the layout stuff and the dynamism and everything that he's
I
really
like that
influenced.
wump.
He's definitely influenced by earlier comics, and it ends up having a sort of Fletcher Hanks vibe to it a little bit. And all of his stuff is very adventure oriented, but like kind of cerebral in the dialogue. He also made a really funny Batman comic. I don't think that he has it in print, but I quite enjoy Graham's comics. So he is at Brain Grammage on Instagram.
He's a
Uh,
pretty young dude too, right?
Super young, yeah, yeah. He's in his
Yeah.
early 20s, and yeah, definitely. The further he goes, the more you can see him sort of using the style stuff, more purposefully.
It's
Um,
just interesting that like I'm seeing some of these younger people going like way far back with their influences, which is interesting to me that that's a thing.
yeah, well, the internet is finally caught up in terms of somebody can read bootleg,
Yeah.
nasty looking bootlegs, but bootleg stuff from the early American comics scene now fairly easily. And I think that has has an effect of sort of demooring somebody from time stylistically.
Yeah.
You see that if you just do a random flip of like college radio stations now, you'll hear a similar kind of thing. You hear something that's like, oh, those people really like New Order, and then you hear that the band, everybody in the band is like 20 years old, so they've all been haven't been alive since New Order was touring, or
Yeah.
whatever.
It's a strange thing to me when I look at my students, how much of what they enjoy is just old stuff.
Right.
Like it's not some new band that they're into, it's some old thing,
Yeah.
which is a bit distressing to me, but that's okay.
Well, somebody who engages directly in that is Tom Kaczynski. And
Yeah.
those of you guys who have read his earlier work, so here's the work that got Tom on my radar many years ago. He had a book called Beta
Yeah.
Testing the Apocalypse come out from Fantagraphics. It's essentially a collection of short stories. and I read it in its earlier form, and then at the show, I got to pick up the new printing of it, which I believe has a lot more going on. And Tom was saying was printed with different methods, but this is one of the first uses that was really significant to me of like personally to me, that is, of Pantone colors. And
Mm.
each of these stories in the book has its own kind of Pantone associations. Now, I actually don't think that this one was actually printed in Pantone. I think Tom was saying that the reprint is done with a combination of CMYK with 2 additional Pantones.
Oh,
Um,
instead of a bunch of spot colors switching
right.
around every 8 pages. Yeah, that makes
E-
sense.
exactly. And, depending on how when you do a reprint, you're at the mercy of what a printer is going to do in terms of the size of the signature and stuff like that. So it can be kind of difficult to get the exact specs. I'm not sure exactly why they did that, but it looks great, and it's a very interesting book. And when I say he actually uses the spot color, this is the type of thing that I mean,
Mm.
um, where the meaning making and image making are both engaged with the second color. It's not just like an afterthought that's popped up on top. And you know, Tom's comics are surprisingly, I would say, shockingly futuristic, and in a sort of true like engagement with it sort of way. And Tom is a really cosmopolitan guy. He's a immigrant who speaks 3 different languages. He's lived in a wide variety of situations, and so when he puts out new comics, like he has with these cartoon dialectics books, it's time to pay attention. And all of his stuff is immaculately designed. I just
Yeah.
love this right here.
Yeah.
Um, this is the back of Cartoon Dialectics 2.
Those
And
are things I need to grab.
heck yes, you do. And really, philosophically engaging work, and physically beautiful, and beautiful drawing as well. And I mentioned him before. He's the publisher of Uncivilized, which is also the publisher of the new Craig Thompson, the Ginseng Roots.
And
And
Matt Madden's stuff. He did Matt Madden's at least the new one.
right.
I'm forgetting the title, but where he keeps going. I think it's called Ex Libris, where he's just
Yeah.
every
Yep.
page is a new style. Yeah.
Yeah. And very, very interesting publisher, fantastic stuff. And yeah, definitely like, I oftentimes feel like, oh, this is interesting, but it's not quite for me. When I look at all the stuff they put out, it's like, oh, this is for me. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah. Similar. That's one of the ones where like I got Ex Libris and I realized that this was like a company, and went and looked at their website and was like, I can't right now. I can't afford all of this, but I just wanted to go through and like just buy everything they've got and do like a publisher review.
yeah,
Because it looks like it's just all great taste.
yeah, really great. And
Oh,
so
that's sexy.
Tom is using this book to serialize, I think, a new graphic novel. And you can see this one has a double cover, so he's working with somebody else's material as well.
Mm.
And you just flip it over and you get his. And very, very interesting stuff. I have not read it yet, so I can't actually give you any kind of critical engagement yet. I just was just drooling over it at the show, and so glad that they were there, and so glad I got to meet Tom.
I feel like I've read some of the beta tests in the Apocalypse, like in anthologies, Best American Comics or Now or something like that.
Mhm.
Like their little future kind of like predictions of how the
Yeah,
future is going to go.
and I think you're gonna really find yourself in there when you get a chance to read it.
I remember being like, oh yeah. Like when
Yeah,
I read it, like, yeah, he's on to it.
yeah, no, and I think you guys will be very simpatico in terms of the sort of thinking about stuff. I mean, look, I mean, how much does this image right here say? I mean, I just can't even.
Yeah.
It just kills me, absolutely kills me. This
I wish
guy,
I could be doing the
this guy with the recursive, video screen, lifting weights, totally ripped, non-functionally ripped,
yeah.
with his glasses on and his short haircut. I mean,
Yeah.
everything about it is perfect,
Yeah.
totally perfect.
Yeah, I got to
And
get all that stuff. Crap.
All right. So Rumi Hara is a amazing cartoonist who was my table mate. Was one of the people who was right next to me while we were, setting it up and everything. And she has a new book out from Drawn and Quarterly called Peanut Butter Sisters. But
Mm.
the one I got was her graphic novel from before that called Nori, and I was lucky enough to score this on page one here. So she drew all that for me.
Ooh, for Sean.
This bat flying away from a kid in a bat costume.
That's
And
awesome.
this is just really beautiful. She's got one color, or sorry, line art with a spot color on there, and each chapter, as we were saying, each chapter has its own tone. And when Matt Battaglia visited the table, we actually got the three of us were nerding out, talking about best ways to do the spot color, and uh, Rumi was saying that she does it with a on the reverse of the original artwork with
Ah,
Lightboard, which is like the Richard Scarry method.
that's smart.
Yeah, I've done that a couple times, but the thing I was telling her is that I can't deal with it anymore. My eyes don't like to be looking into the bulb like that. You have to
Yeah,
turn it off to see the true tone of the thing that you've painted.
yeah.
So we were trying to. Matt and I were kind of showing her the overlay method and just being like, you can just tape this overlay right on there. But anyway, her stuff is just really fantastic. She's a very interesting stylist. You look at like her cartoony figures. Um,
Yeah.
she's got some flexibility to it in terms of she's not like super rigid with the design from panel to panel, so she gets some additional kind of emotionality through it. Anyway, I'm super excited about actually reading the book because I have not done that yet. But you can see things like frogs burping out characters' names in the middle of Metamorphosis.
Oh man. I gotta go next year with like $4,000.
The $4,000 SPX challenge.
Yeah, just like can't is that enough to get everything you want, or will you still have to be choosy?
I think there's probably still going to be a certain amount of choosing. Yeah.
Do you
Uh,
remember like as a kid, like Toys R Us would run those like competitions once a year where like
yeah.
if you won, then you'd get to run through Toys R Us for like 5 minutes and just like dump. That's what I want to do at SPX is like, okay, you have 4 minutes, just
Wait,
go.
didn't that's from some game too. There was some game show that used to do that. Yeah, the Toys R Us one came after it was a grocery game on some game show where your job was to get as expensive groceries as you could possibly get in a time
I
limit.
don't remember that. I just
But
remember being a kid, like just dreaming of winning that prize and then like planning my route out to like, okay, the Game Boy aisle and like the Spawn action figure aisle. Like that's and now I would do it at SPX. I would like have all the vendors planned out and like people like the fellow who you just held up,
yeah,
uh,
no,
who I
totally.
have actually already
Yeah.
rated everything that he's done. So I would just be grabbing seconds, but he would be at the
Oh, I'm
top of my
sorry.
list.
Tom, you mean?
No, 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 no. The one you haven't had in
Rumi.
your hand,
Oh
Andrew.
yeah, Rumi is a female.
No, no, no,
Um,
Andrew. You were just
Andrew.
holding
Oh,
up
you saw
Yearly.
it. Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So here's the next one I got. I'm sorry, I was very confused what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
one that, yeah.
Andrew White is another person that I have you know been aware of since like 2010 or something,
I didn't
which
know
is a
you
little
knew his work.
yeah. I had seen I used to write for different small sites, and sometimes they would do like comics challenges and stuff, and I think that he was in some like poetry comics
Mm-hmm.
challenge or something.
That
I
makes
don't remember
sense.
exactly what it was, but I've been aware of him since like 2009, 2010, which was a little puzzling when I meet him, and he is a cherubic faced, young man of indeterminable age. So it's possible, Andrew, that you're a vampire. Congratulations. Um, this
Yeah, I
is
saw a picture of him and I was like, this does not meet the image I formed of this dude because he's so prolific and he's been doing it for at least 10 years now, right? I mean, I ordered everything he
more
had
than
on
that.
his site and it was a stack of books like that big.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's been doing this for at least 13 years, and he definitely has been drinking someone's perfect blood. Uh, and anyway, this is his latest, which I know that you have done a review of. I have not
Yeah.
read it yet. It's called Yearly, and he and I got to talk. He was just right across the street from us, so other than I didn't have to go far because I
Yeah.
just saw his stuff from across, and we got to talk before setup on Saturday. A really interesting guy, really interesting stuff to say, and I'm hoping that Andrew and actually Rumi too and Tom will all do interviews with us at some point.
I
This
would
is
love to interview Andrew. He does fascinating process stuff too. Like if you look through his book, he's always kind of trying different process stuff, it looks like.
mm-hmm. And yeah, he's got a lot of flexibility with his style, and he's definitely like engaged with what type of making am I doing and how it's going to impact it, and also super engaged with the physicality of it too. And one of the things that he almost immediately mentioned to me when we were talking about how he's putting together this particular thing is he said, well, I do short run digital, so it looks good in short run digital. And I thought that was a very self-aware thing, like
Mm-hmm.
he's thinking about the destination while he's making it, which I think is a very valuable skill to have. Whether that drives you crazy in the long run is another set of questions. But he's like aware, like, okay, so I'm not going too thin on my line, or these types of pastel-y kind of colors. Like he's got an unlimited color palette because it's the digital. It's just somebody who's making very purposeful stuff that is like across the board thoughtful. So very interesting things, very interesting discussion, which I didn't have permission to share, so I'm not going to talk about it. But we had some really interesting things, I think, to say to each other. At least he had interesting things to say to me, and he tolerated me saying things at him. So that's a plus in
Yeah,
my book.
he's over the last year probably one of my two favorite finds, and someone that I'm just like absolutely hype about. So I'm
Nice.
glad. I would have been just at his table bothering him the whole time, and he would have been like, "Would you please quit posting videos of my stuff and quit trying to talk to me?"
He interestingly enough, he had he's one of the people who I was kind of sort of taking notes on his setup, and one of the things that he had out I thought was very interesting was a box that said "old stuff, $1
Mm.
or $2," and it was essentially stuff that he doesn't feel like represents him well anymore, but you can still get it from a box.
Oh, I would have rated that because he probably doesn't have that stuff on his website. He's like one of the few people I would be OCD about, and it drives me nuts in his books. He'll be like, "Oh, I did like 70 pages of this thing and I didn't like it, so I just left it in a drawer and I'll see if I'll come back to it." And me, being OCD, I'm like, "Oh, but like I bet I would like it." Like you're just really self-critical, who knows, maybe they're total shit and he's right. But like in the beginning of those yearlies every year, he always talks about how many, I don't know. I mean, he's so prolific too. Like it's just absurd how much comics he makes in a year. But and a lot of it seems like over half of it just sits in a drawer and doesn't even get seen.
Hmm.
So I would have been raiding those for sure.
Yeah, he's a very he's got a very particular style, and the only cartoonist that I was really thinking like is very connected to him is somebody that I actually mentioned to him by name at the show, and I don't know if you've ever seen any of his stuff because it's not necessarily always available. But Derek Badman, have you ever read
Mm-mm.
any of Derek Badman's stuff? So the only reason I mentioned this to Andrew was just because Derek is also engaged with um, like serious fumetti. So fumetti is essentially like using photos and then making comics out of the photos.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew has one or two of his comics that he's used, what look like solarized prints or whatever. So he'll take a photo and then high contrast it and then de-emphasize it by using like a color or screen or
Yeah.
transparency or whatever. And reminiscent of some of Derek's stuff. And then after I said that to him, I realized that Andrew's use of word and picture and sort of the pacing also seems to be very influenced by Derek Badman. So if you haven't looked up Derek Badman, definitely check him out. he's another person who's been very quietly making comics for a very long period of time, and it's a very interesting writer on comics too. I don't know if he's still doing writing on comics, but at least back in 2009, 2010, I always found lots to dig in with his. I've been very influenced by his view of comics. One of
I'll
the
have
best.
to look him up.
Yeah, one of the best essays on comics I ever read. In fact, there was two that came out right one after the other. Derek writing about Cross Game, Mitsuru Adachi, and then Joe McCullough writing about Cross Game immediately afterwards. So intimidating that I scratched an essay that I had planned on Cross Game and wrote something completely different instead.
I'll have to look him up because, yeah, that you said like quietly making comics. And that's why I felt like when I found Andrew's stuff, I was like, this dude's been doing this for a long time. And it's pins all the way through. Like, why am I not hearing this guy's name with like Michael DeForge and Chris Ware? Because he also does seem so singularly him.
Yeah.
That it's real auteur stuff that to me is up there with Chris Ware in terms of just quality. And it's like, why hasn't there been a big collection of this dude's work? Like it's really astonishing to me that he's not one of the biggest names going right now.
Yeah, well, if he'll do an interview with us, you can ask him what's wrong. No,
no, I mean I've talked to
joking.
him on Instagram a bunch and been like, are there collections of this? And
well, really great stuff, and it was very interesting to very briefly get to look at his booth. Although we mostly just shot the breeze. Yeah. Okay, I don't think this is out, so I'm not going to show too much of it. But this is Shock by Neil R. King. And I believe he just printed up a few promo copies, and I was lucky enough to be the recipient of one of these for perhaps obvious reasons. I'm not sure. But it is a really, really interesting graphic novel about monster movie making in, I think, the late 60s, early 70s. And it's, nice, chunky brushwork, and then some black and white tonal stuff that he's like texture adjusted to give the appearance of like I don't know, Conte Crayon, that old technique. But very interesting stuff, and meticulously researched. And it just, when I look at a comic that takes place in a particular time period, these are the types of things I look for. Look at that haircut.
Yeah, well, I mean, it looks like Scooby-Doo or something.
Well, I mean, there's a reason that Scooby-Doo looks like that, right?
Yeah. That's it was a compliment.
Yeah. I haven't read it yet. I'm very excited to read it, but I was very interested to get it, and I feel very grateful that he popped by.
Yeah, that looks cool.
Neil King is the writer and illustrator of this. So anyway, I'll give you all a report after I've read it. Okay. So this is actually paid, or I was a Kickstarter supporter for this. This is Jeff Robertson.
Yeah.
Put this together, and instead of him having to ship this across the border, I just stole a copy from his booth when he wasn't looking, and so now you know, Jeff. And very interesting anthology. This is essentially like Jeff found out that there was a law that forbid in Canada certain kinds of criminal acts to be depicted, and he basically went through and assembled an anthology where every single forbidden criminal act is included.
Are those old? Because I know he does a lot of restoration. Is it all old stuff that he's found and restored, or this is all new work?
This is all new work. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is all new work. And he's one of the artists. But it was a very interesting thing because there's a few things that are a few stolen illustrations that are timely. But yeah, and very interested to see it. It's a great idea for a comic, and also it's printed on genuine newsprint, which I haven't seen in a really long time.
Let me see like a page out of it. Oh, okay. That's a risk because it's going to age, but he wants that, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's a very interesting kind of thing. And I'm excited about the reading it, although there's some fairly grotesque stuff in it that you might imagine. But yeah, very cool thing. And his publishing company, Contraband, is doing some really interesting small press stuff, and they had a cool booth. And Jeff and his I don't know if they're married, but his partner had some very interesting ideas in terms of having a spread of stuff, and that was one of the booths that I was like really taking notes on in terms of seeing like buttons and minis and their larger publications. And it was like they really were trying to run the gamut, which I think
Yeah.
is a pretty wise thing in a situation like that. We've talked a few times on the show about how my wife and I used to be buskers, and there's a similar kind of dynamic happening when you're a busker, where if you don't have a CD, there's no way for somebody who really, really likes you to show the appreciation,
Yeah.
because somebody who really, really likes you wants to be able to just give you a $20 bill, but that's not like a normal response, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so having a CD gives them that excuse for it. It doesn't even necessarily mean that that person's going to listen to the CD, although hopefully, they do.
Yeah.
It's that you're giving them an opportunity for that, and I think a similar kind of thing in reverse. Like I was not giving people an opportunity to show their appreciation for the books by giving something small.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so one of the things I'm considering is for future books, if I can, work out like, hey, can I make a sticker out of this? Can we do some kind of promo item for this? Uh,
Prints, little prints, or
exactly, things
yeah.
like that, where somebody can have some kind of like theoretical engagement with the smaller version of it. Although just having minis, I think is a really good solution to that as well. The other person who
Yeah.
was next to me had a wide range of stuff too. It was fascinating. She had tiny little buttons that she had made. She had really minis, and then she had big monster hats that she made.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And she was super nice too. Okay, so Rumi actually drew the cover for the XPX uh,
Oh.
show as well, which was really cool. And it was nice to like look at the cover after having seen her draw for a while and be like, "Did you do that?" It's
It
just
looks different from the book you showed,
yeah.
for
Well, I mean,
sure.
it's full color,
Yeah.
and she's using less dry brush, like a cleaner kind of
Yeah.
line for it. But yeah, similar kind of bounce to the cartooning. But anyway, really great cartoonist, and this
Yeah.
is definitely a fun keepsake. And then I think I got two more things here. So
You told me that you had, because one of the things that came out of that we're super grateful for is Heidi McDonald wrote an article about SPX and
oh
mentioned
yeah,
you a number of times, and
hmm
and shouted out the abolition of man as her book of the show, which was
yeah.
awesome, and we appreciate that. I listened to the podcast that they included with that, and they were talking about a certain genre of comic, and you said you wound up with one of those and you were going to show it
Oh
to me.
yeah. I mean, I think so. I think this would qualify.
Manatee. Yeah, maybe. What's the story?
Well, so I haven't read the whole thing yet, but essentially, this is a person who falls underwater, I think, off of a pirate ship, and you know, essentially, there's like a mermaid, but she has the face of a manatee. So I don't know if you all know. First off, if you're not from Florida, you probably haven't seen a manatee in person, but they're very interesting. They're like, I mean, they really are like the cows of the sea. You
I
know.
got to see one like at the end of the summer. Me and Tori went to the Atlanta Aquarium, and they had a manatee tank, and they were like,
Wow.
they were bumping up against the glass and stuff, and they're impressive.
Yeah, they really are. And if I grew up in Central Florida, and you can just go see them at the spring.
Yeah.
There's these natural springs where there's like a rock or whatever, that, opening to the cavern underneath, and then the water comes out, and the manatees love it, and they'll come up, and anyway, so allegedly, sailors' myths about mermaids are based on manatees. And you can imagine if you're a sailor who hasn't seen a woman in 9 months, and has been on a ship, and all of a sudden you pull into port and you see something underwater that you might, I don't.
They're pretty desperate.
So
That's like a caveman looking out and seeing two hills and being like, yeah.
right, exactly. But this book seems to engage with that idea by basically making the manatee mermaid alluring.
Yeah,
Which
yeah. And this is the genre that they were talking about that
it
I've
is
noticed a
okay.
lot of, which is like fantasy animals. And I really, this is all coming from the Heidi McDonald podcast. So
Okay,
credit to the four women in the hotel that made that
right.
podcast. But they were saying that there needs to be a term for this new genre, and I was like, yeah, you're right, because there is. And I have always associated it with Boom Studios. They have all these
Mm.
books that are kind of like Disney manga, and then you get, it will be like a centaur magic creature working at a coffee shop, and they were pointing out that it seems to have something to do with people in their young 20s learning about living real life, but then the
Mm.
characters are all fantasy. And I've seen a lot of that, and it's usually tied to some LGBTQ queer kind of
Hmm.
outlook on the world, and there just seems to be a plethora of those. And I was joking with you about it, and you're like, oh, I got one of those.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I feel like I'm going to step in it, and but the roots of it is clearly at least partially the Disney cartoons of the proliferation of the VHS, easily readily available Disney stuff. You hear a lot of people talk about, like, if you read up on like furry fandom and stuff, people talking about like, oh, I saw Robin Hood for the first time, and that's when I knew that I was a fox or whatever. Um, I
Yeah.
well, I mean, I think that that's part of the sort of engagement, is like you're saying, like a fantasy land. And when you say like, oh, I'm a centaur working at a coffee shop, if you think about it, like if you are in a day to day situation, this is a way maybe of kind of embroidering your experience with your fantasy life. Um,
Well, yeah, and it always serves all the ones I've seen. I think why they always bump up into like the queer comics is that it's a good way of representing yourself as feeling like an outsider or something,
yeah.
or it's just a good kind of metaphor
Oh,
for
sure.
that. And so they go really well hand in hand.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably the thing that like something like Cerebus borrows the most from Howard the Duck.
Hmm.
Um, so like Howard the Duck, he's a duck in a world that he didn't make, right? He's a duck who's displaced from duckhood
Yeah.
uh, by being around people, and essentially, Cerebus just flips that by having other people not see it.
Yeah.
Uh, so then you can sort of see that as a metaphor for otherness, and in comics you can draw it. So it doesn't have to necessarily literally be a mermaid, a manatee mermaid uh, monster. You can just draw them in a different fashion, and
Yeah.
and have that otherness be part of it. But yeah, it's an interesting genre, and I'll be interested to see what people do with it, and also sort of if there's going to be engagements with the sort of historical precedents for it. Um, and I think that's a talk for a later date. But
Yeah.
I'm interested to see it, and if anybody has recommendations for that kind of stuff that we should read, I'd be very curious to see.
Well,
I
I'll
hear,
check with my students too, because I would
yeah,
say 9 out of 10 of my female students, when I look through their sketchbook, they're planning one of those books.
interesting. So this
Like
is
I
maybe
see a
like,
bunch of that in my students. Well, I think they're looking at like Noel Stevenson and all those boom artists who are
okay,
kind of doing that thing, and Adventure Time.
right,
There seems to be a set of influences that are coming through right now, and that's one of the big
yep,
ones. So
like the Steven Universe, and
yeah,
even
that's the
like
other
the
one.
My Little Pony stuff.
Hmm.
Is a similar kind of thing. Even though that's a reinvigorated franchise, it reaches back towards the other stuff in a direct way. Yeah, so that's very interesting. Powerpuff Girls, even.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Those are all
and so
big
yes,
touchstones for my students.
so yeah, I'm using 20-year-old references to discuss a new phenomenon.
Yeah. No, but I mean, a lot of them are looking at that stuff though.
Yeah.
The My Little Pony Friendship is Magic was a big one too.
Hmm.
I had a student do a self-portrait as a pony, and it was perfect. It looked exactly like him, but also perfectly like a pony. So anyways, what else have
Yeah.
you got?
Last thing I've got is this is a new top shelf book, Under Earth by Chris Gooch, who
That
is
looks
an
cool.
Australian artist. Some commonality with some of the other things we're talking about, in that it's got science fiction setting of a sort,
Mm.
and has two color usage, and the color shift through here. Um, very kindly given to me by my old acquaintance at Top Shelf. This is a scratch and dent copy where some pages were coming out. But this is a new Top Shelf book that is very interesting. I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited by it, and also excited to see them doing some international people.
Yeah,
Working
looks
with
great.
international cartoonists. So this should be a very interesting read. And yeah, so I don't
And
know.
Top Shelf was celebrating 25 years. Is that correct, or was that Uncivilized?
Well, it can't be. I don't think that Uncivilized has been around for 25 years, so it's got to have
I
been.
think it was Top Shelf. I just
Yeah.
remember when they were talking, that podcast I was listening to, they were saying it was one of those two is celebrating, and then it seemed like one of the two of them is like this is their last year.
Oh, that would be Ad House. Yeah.
Ad House was closing. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was the other one, which is too bad because they do a lot of good work.
they do. They've had an amazing track record and very interesting stuff. And yeah, a lot of the people that we've talked about here would have been natural fits, I think, for Ad House in a previous time. So
Yeah,
yeah, this is not at all representative of the show. This is just like representative of the things that I mean, very, very small, and the things I happen to see, um, but and the things that happen to come to me too.
yeah.
Because I really did just stand at the table basically the entire time. I didn't eat lunch either day.
Oh wow, you did the Todd McFarlane thing, huh? Like
Oh,
don't
is
eat, just
that?
yeah.
Well, I had a big.
He used to just sit there for like 10 hours straight and not even go to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's what I did. I
Yeah.
washed my hands a couple times because I really didn't want to bring COVID home to my kids.
No, you
Uh,
don't.
yeah, but I seem to have managed to avoid it. So
Yeah, yeah, it was so frustrating because like we went to Comic Con. We've been me and Torch. She's been on airplanes multiple times over the last 2.5 years. I've been working with the public. Like we've gone to these big concerts. We never got COVID. She got in a car with 3 other people, and
yeah,
she got it. And yeah, it sucks.
yeah. Well, I mean, in those other situations, you're only seeing somebody for a couple seconds, right? So it's a little bit, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a difficult thing, but I'm hoping that gets better soon, and I'm glad that you're feeling better.
yeah.
Uh,
Super Dodgers no more, but I just had like 4 days of like a mild cold, and that was cool.
yeah,
Uh,
our neighbors and I are the only people that I know who still have not gotten it, but nobody in my family has gotten it so far. So,
Stay in your bubble.
and my friend James in Florida, who has basically not been taking any precautions. Uh, so
He got it
he
like early on and was asymptomatic and is immune now or some crazy thing like
right,
that.
exactly, yeah. Or
One of
he's
those
like from
jerks.
the right like corner of like German peasant stock to have like
Natural immunity. Yeah.
they had
Well,
COVID
stay
in
in your
Germany.
bubble.
Right.
Stay safe, everybody. But
Yeah.
yeah, dude, I gotta figure out how to get there next year and help you table and give us both time to go look at stuff and make more connections and chat more because I'm
Yeah.
just jealous. I'm just sitting here jealous. Like
Well,
so jealous. It looks
it
so
was
fun.
incredibly inspirational, and has been a really big wake up for me in terms of being able to kick my butt into high gear and get working on some of my projects, which
Which include
yeah. So if you've ever visited the Living the Line website, you might sometime take a look at the schedule on the front page, which is always very exciting when I add something to there or take something away.
yeah.
Um, which some stuff that's coming up I can't list for various legal or contractual reasons, but other stuff is sort of aspirationally listed on there. And one of the things that's aspirationally listed on there is yeah, so some of you guys might know I had a graphic novel that I worked on from 2007 or 8 to 2011, and I did about 200 pages, 220 pages of a graphic novel way back when. And a couple months ago, I made the decision that this is ridiculous. Thanks, Carson, for kicking my my butt.
Yeah, Sean
And
sent it to me. I was like, here's this thing I abandoned. I think it sucks. I'm gonna go do this thing about Star Trek. And I was like, oh, sorry. Like, no, it's just
yeah, go. It's fine. Go ahead.
like like finish that thing, Sean. It's awesome. And I see some behind you there. So I'm like,
Yeah. So this has been interesting because I have a giant stack. Let me see if it's something I can find that you might want to see, but also is okay. Here we go. I've got a giant stack here of stuff. You guys might know I sprained a finger back in December, and it's basically made it impossible for me to ink with a nib up until a couple weeks
mm,
ago. And so I really wanted to work on this graphic novel. And so a couple weeks before we started moving, I started just penciling. And I would kind of exploratorily ink a little bit. And I was like, nope, still looks terrible. Uh, and then I ended up with a stack of like, I mean, I don't even know how many pages of pencil. It's probably like 40 or 50
mm,
before we moved. I mean, very quick. And, you know, penciling for me is a little bit different because I use a sort of two-stage process. So here's a penciled page here. And you can see, I mean, I've just basically got the barest of indications here.
yeah.
There's no background to this. You can just barely tell what's happening here. They don't really have their environment yet. I've got a little note that she needs to be bigger. You know, it's not like a completed pencil page, but you know, the figures that are there are ready to be inked. And what I generally do with something like this is I do it in two stages. I have it roughed in where I have an idea what's going to happen in the background. I do the figures and get the weights of the figures first, and then I detail pencil the background. And the reason for that is because I'm a lefty, so I have a tendency to smudge really
Mm,
bad while I'm working, and I get a little bit too like I can't get finicky enough with the background unless the figures are finished. Um, and so you know, when I say I penciled, you know, 45 or 50 pages, I mean this is what I'm talking about.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so anyway, what I realized, having mostly recovered with my hand, what I realized is that I really don't actually. The physical limitation was not entirely the hand. The physical limitation was also the skill set is just so totally different. And you look at like the, you know, fully rendered panel on the bottom here. I haven't inked anything that looked like this in more than 10 years.
Yeah.
Uh, and you know, the entire rest of the book looks like this, so it's not like I'm gonna I
Just
don't I,
dropped all the cross hatching.
exactly, which was like my first kind of thought. So I mean, I really want it to look like itself. I want it to look like the other pages. I don't want somebody to be like tripping over it the entire time
Yeah.
while they're reading it. Like, oh, where did this change? You know, and so it's been quite the process to sort of reintegrate my skills and like remind myself like what it is that I used to do. And I had a really specific process for a reason, you know. Um, and regardless of the tools that I use, I pretty much have to follow my process because
Yeah.
otherwise the balance isn't right. It's not satisfying to me in the same kind of way, you know.
The balance of thick to thin and dark black to gray. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yep. Those are the two big ones, and there's some like textural things too, and also just sort of reminding myself that like when you make like a gray, quote unquote, gray area, that you can activate it in different ways. So like this right here has an arc to
Mm-hmm.
the cross hatching that is reinforcing her movement in right here, and so
Yeah.
it's not flat behind them. It's got movement to it, and you can see those big crosshatch
Yeah.
lines. And then the
Yeah.
second layer right here that's creating like the darker layer behind her also has its own kind of arc on top of it. And all of those things I've just sort of forgotten over
Yeah.
10 years, which makes sense. I mean, that's a really long period of time.
Well, and you moved on to like a much more dry brush kind of Japanese kind of brush
Mhm.
ink style in the meantime.
Right.
And doing more like portrait realistic type of portrait work and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'd imagine even the cartooning was kind of like a
Well,
relearning process.
a little bit, yeah. But I've done a lot of cartooning for, you know, illustrations and stuff for other clients and
Okay.
things like that. So, and that's sort of my most natural mode.
Okay.
Uh, So that's that part. The characters are actually much better in my estimation now. Like I have improved that aspect of it, but the physical ink stuff, that was a real struggle to sort of get myself back to it. But now, I'm doing a certain amount every day and every night, and now I feel like I'm getting pretty close to the standard that I had sort of set for myself before. But this is I'm not going to work in this style ever again. This is going to be a one. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
we were
finish.
we were talking about that the other night, that like I have one more book I want to do in the Strange Death style, but I don't know by the time, if I ever get to it, by the time I get around to it, that I'm even physically capable of it anymore. And you start to realize like why Dave was just like, I can't do Strange Death
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
Like even if there wasn't some crazy mysterious wrist malady,
yeah.
just as you get older, like that shit hurts.
It does, and there's certain kinds of things. I saw him commenting the other day about an upstroke. It's like the stroke that goes and has a turn and
Mm-hmm.
also a feather at the same time. I mean, that's just like that is difficult now, and it doesn't affect everything. Like I can get broader with other stuff, but basically, like I feel like this page, even though there's like not a lot of minute texture, this page is probably as good as anything that I did prior. um it just took a lot of whiteout afterwards. Like overstrokes, like in
Yeah.
order to get loose enough to make these marks, these long 3 or 4 inch hatching marks, there's a lot of overstroking, and so I had to go back in with white and tidy up after in a way that I didn't used to before.
Because you had better control over your start and stop
Hmm.
before. Yeah,
Yep.
that might come back, but also there's a point where that's the thing that winds up killing your tendons, is that like, because you're
Yeah.
so activated in I mean, just doing that, I can feel the pain in my right elbow.
Well, the thing is that yeah, I have almost no pain in the arm, elbow, and shoulder. It's almost all fingers for
Wow.
me. And so the counterintuitively, the looser the tool is, the better off I am. So me relearning how to ink while having a damaged hand involved me starting with a brush and then
Yeah.
going to a super loose nib, and then I went to the tight Hunt's nib temporarily. And now I'm realizing actually I probably shouldn't even mess with the Hunt's nib because that's the thing that's going to give me the long term
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So now I've just stuck on the here. We're totally off topic now, but
No, that's
I'm
fine.
back on the Esterbrook 290 lithographic
Okay.
nibs, and so I don't know what I'm going to do when I run out of this box here because these are now
Old.
super expensive. Well, these are
Yeah,
from
old stock. New old stock.
2000, or this is from 1910, I think.
Oh shit.
Um, so
Treat
I've,
them gently.
I've only got I don't know, maybe 2 dozen left. So
Yeah. You can make that work if you only use it for the cross hatching.
yeah, that's true. That's true. What I was thinking about doing is only using it for the figures, and then using a Hunt's 102 with no pressure for the cross hatching.
That's what I did on Strange Death, like a
Okay.
brush everything, and I would actually cross hatch a lot of, if it was closed, I did the cross hatching with the brush.
Right.
But if it was a wall or something flat, then I would switch over to the Hunt 102.
Right. Like with no pressure at all, right? But I'm just once I have the tool in my hand, I have to be persuaded to drop it. So that's the problem is I'm gonna have to just do it like as a 2-stage process,
Yeah, yeah,
which is how I work anyway. Like I do the figures and get the part of the reason that I was having such difficulty is I was not getting enough thick to thin on the figures because I wasn't anticipating, oh, right, when I do the background, if these are not as fine, there's a balance that you have to get.
yeah.
Something that's describing a texture or something that's describing value has to be much more subverted than the lines that are describing contour and figure. In
I'll
my
give. Sorry, go ahead.
in my estimation, anyway. Like,
I'll give you an extra tip for the Hunt 102 with no pressure
okay,
that I learned during Strange Death. If you take the paper, like the paper sitting flat, and
right,
you just lift it up so
okay,
that whatever weight that the pin is putting down, like you're not putting any pressure, it's just the weight of the pin making the line already, and then
okay,
you lift it up and it will just flex the paper away from the pin just enough that it's actually like an even lighter touch than the pin with no pressure, but a table behind it.
Okay.
That's what I found to get those like ridiculously tiny lines in Strange Death was you lift the paper up and you let the paper bend. Not that you would maybe in your book need to get that small, but for people who are wondering, it's a Hunt 102 with no pressure. You're just dragging it, you're not pushing.
Gotcha.
And then if you let the paper flex, that's even less pressure on the tip of the pin, so less flex with the nib.
I feel a little better knowing that you used a 102 for a lot of that hatching, because I mean, it's a superhuman performance. It's like
but on the close it's a brush and it looks the same. Just to brag.
Awesome.
But anyways, I'm super excited. Can you give people the title of that book?
Yeah, it's called Discards is the name of the book, Discards. And it's about a gentleman who is in his early 20s. This is a pre-cell phone age. I'd say the book probably takes place in the mid-90s. And he moves to the town that he grew up in and works at a thrift store. And basically his entire world is the distance between his house and the store. And so everything, all the action, I believe, in the entire book takes place either at the house or at the store or anything that is within walking distance in between, with a few little satellite exceptions. I had several experiences as a young person being in that sort of limited environment. And it's interesting now that we're so far removed from that. I think it's it would be a kind of unique experience now. But at the time, I found that to be a meditative kind of thing. And, you get into different sorts of situations and different sorts of troubles and different sorts of excitements when your world is confined physically like that,
Yeah. And having read however much of it that you finished, it's a really good, just like down to earth drama comic. And that's why I was like, dude, you got to finish this. Come on, man. Like the rendering is crazy. Like the mix of cartoony with like these crazy hatched realistic backgrounds. And then just like the driving kind of regular day-to-day drama without any like need for a fucking multiverse or superpowers or mermaids or any, it's just like people living their life. I found really compelling. So I'm glad you're it looks like cooking through it pretty good.
I'm trying. It has been more back and forth on pages that I've ever done in my life. I've got a stack of like I said, 50 or something, and I just keep on cycling through the stack as my skills are re-emerging. And I'm like going back in and like, oh, I missed the black. That's why this page wasn't successful. Oh, the panel border was too narrow. That's why this isn't successful. It's like little things like that. And it's just like I had a formula before. By the time I hit like page 50 of the previous, segment of the book, I had a formula. This was how I did it, and I had to follow the formula. And you know what? And now that I'm following the formula, it starts to look like itself again, which is
you're not sinning anymore.
Right? Exactly. Yeah, I'm obeying the limitations, the cosmic limitations.
Yeah.
So
well, that looks fantastic. I can't wait to see it. I mean, I've seen a lot of it, but I can't wait to see the finished.
It's going to look a lot better.
The finished product. And
awesome.
So, anyways, thanks for making me super jealous. And I can't wait to see. I really, really hope I can go next year and that people can come out and hang out with us.
Yeah, and amazing. I don't want to like harp on it because the social stuff is just awesome. I mean, so many interesting people and so much goodwill towards interesting things being made, and it was really great.
And people that actually love comics instead of a multimedia pop extravaganza that overwhelmed us in San Diego.
Very, very different experiences.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.